Moving, Councillor Lang, seconding, is all in favor of approval of the agenda? Okay, carried. Approval of the minutes of our previous meeting of June 6th. Were there any, anyone notice any modifications or needed? Nope. All right. Councillor Lang moving to approve. Councillor Luck seconding. All in favor of approving the minutes of June 6th? Carried. Thank you. Okay. So now that brings us to our application today. Sorry, I have to scroll down here. Which I will be handing over to Ms. Haley. Oh, sorry, no, I guess we have to do, declaration of pecuniary interest first. Does anyone have any declarations of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof with regarding to the file this evening? None noted. Okay. Now we can go on to the new business, which is application A1322 Lefebvre. And so I'll hand it over to Ms. Haley to walk us through that application.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So before we get started this evening, I am required to read wording under the Ontario Planning Act. So this is a hearing under Section 44 of the Ontario Planning Act. Any person may attend this hearing and or make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the proposed minor variance. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions at this hearing before the minor variance is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the minor variance of the Committee of Adjustment to the Ontario Land Tribunal, also known as OLT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a hearing or make written submissions to the Committee of Adjustment or the Township of South Glengarry before the minor variance is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So we have one application before us this evening. This application is legally described as part of Lot 8, Registered Plan 19, in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in the township of South Glengarry, and it's located at 19698 Warren Street in the village of Williamstown. We have a key map to help orient us where the property is located. So the body of water in the bottom of the map would be the Raisin River. You'd cross the Raisin River. This would be County Road 27, and this is Warren Street, so it's located on the south side. We also have, sorry? 27, oh, sorry. So we also, or County Road 19, I'm sorry. We also have an aerial view of the subject property. I know it's difficult to see. This view wasn't the most recent view. Our recent aerial view was very tree covered, so I picked an older aerial view to kind of help the committee and the public understand where we are. So this is the existing dwelling. This is the existing shed. Again, I understand it's difficult to see. And this would be the location of the municipal drain. One thing I'd like to caution you on is this is not a completely accurate image simply because this is not a survey. We have our parcel fabric overlaid on aerial photography that are at different scales. So it's not a quite true representation of what truly is on the subject property. So the purpose of the minor variance is the owner wishes to demolish an existing shed and to construct a residential detached garage in a similar location as the shed is a bit west further. Therefore, the following relief from the zoning bylaw 3809 is requested. To reduce the front yard setback from 6 meters to 3.38 meters as per part 6.2 of the bylaw, and as well as to reduce the watercourse setback from the municipal drain located at the east side of the subject property from 30 meters to 2.44 meters. And the existing shed is currently located as close as 0.91 meters in the southeast corner to the municipal drain. So I have a few aerial views to show you. This would be the subject property basically from a west side view where you can see the existing dwelling and the existing shed. And this would be from the opposite side where you can see the shed and the dwelling. And then this one is a direct front view of the existing shed. And then on this side, right in here, I kind of show where the location of the drain is. I realize it's difficult to see from the distance, but you can actually see a little bit of water located in the drain in that location. And if we were up close, you could slightly see the shed through. So it's quite close as you can tell. This is a survey that was completed by Stidwell. In this location, it shows the outline of the existing shed. And then you'll see that they're proposing to shift the new garage over further. That will come out, which is, here's the 24 feet wide and the 24 feet depth. And then this would leave sufficient parking for cars in between the existing house and the proposed garage. The client, or the applicant I should say, hand drew on the existing dwelling in the best location as possible just to help us orient the layout of the site. So the property is designated rural settlement area in the county official plan, and it does conform to the general intent of the official plan. And the property is zoned residential 1, and it does conform to the general intent of the zoning bylaw. We did circulate the application to all abutting property owners within 60 meters, as well as applicable municipal staff, including our drainage superintendent. We couldn't review this application or make a recommendation without our drainage superintendent being involved, given his knowledge of the area and the accessibility to the drain. So following that review, administration is able to support and recommend it to be approved, as we feel the new garage is improving the existing situation. We also circulated the application to the Region Conservation Authority because of the proximity to the municipal drain, and the RCA completed their review. In fact, they only got around to doing their review today. I think they're just very busy with the volume of applications. And they are requesting that the application be deferred. And I do want to explain to the best of my ability as to why. So we did receive a letter this afternoon following a site visit from the Conservation Authority. And the Conservation Authority has pointed out a few things that they may have concerns with, and it really does pertain to a hazard and the stable slope of that drain. And so what they've requested is if the committee would consider deferring the application to allow the applicant and the RSCA to work more closely together to review the erosion concerns and potentially adjust the location of the garage outside of the erosion hazard. If that was possible, that would mean that the garage would be required to be shifted closer to the dwelling, which would be closer to the west. So to date, I've not received any written or oral comments from members of the public. Again, it's going back to the comments. As much as administration has reviewed this and reviewed this with our drainage superintendent, we also don't look at what the Conservation Authority looks at all the time. And so with their concerns with the erosion hazard, they wanted a little bit more time. Now the committee has three choices this evening. They have a choice to approve the application that's before them. They have a choice to defer the application as per the request of the RCA, or they have a choice to refuse the application. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them. We do have Ms. Lefebvre here in the meeting this evening. If there's any specific questions for her, I know she'd be happy to answer them. Unfortunately, she was just made aware of the situation minutes before the meeting because of the timing of everything happening today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haley. Perhaps before giving the applicant a chance to speak, does anyone or any members of the committee would like to ask any questions, or Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. My question is for the applicant, so when she speaks, that likely would be fine.
Yeah, if you'd like. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to know if this is going to completely throw a wrench into the project, or if you're okay with a delay to confer with the RCA. I think, to me, it should be doable, the project. I know they have some concerns about the bank, but if you move 15 feet further north, there is no bank because it's a long culvert going under from the east side of the road on an angle right through. I know if you move 100 feet south, there's no bank because it goes between the pub and Bruno Major's shed, and with their clearance of about inches likely, it goes right through the middle of town. So I know it's quite likely quite doable. Are you okay if to consult with the Razor Union, or do you need this to happen now?
had hoped that we could have this garage built before next winter because it was to keep our vehicles protected, and we need the storage as well for things like our lawnmower. And the present shed is, I can barely get my car in. It was built in the 70s, and it's very small, very tight. The bank does not seem to change very much over the years. My mother lived in that house before I lived in it, and it really, there's a lot of vegetation on it, and it doesn't seem to erode. There's some stonework too that's up against the side, so I really had no concerns about it eroding. We are going to be further from the bank. We were moving over, I believe it's 8 feet further over from the present corner of the garage. So I think we are quite far from it.
Thank you. Could I have a follow-up? Ms. Haley, how long would this, like, would it be able to come back at the next meeting if you guys were to do a consult with the Conservation Authority?
Sorry. I don't believe it will, and I'll explain to you why. And I mentioned this to Mrs. Lefebvre just right before the meeting. If such thing, there is agreement to relocate the garage west further, we require the survey to be updated because we need to know the measurement of the new setback from the top of bank to where that east wall is going to be proposed. And it has taken Mrs. Lefebvre a long time to obtain a copy of that survey in order to be able to get here. I mean, we pre-consulted with you last year.
Yeah, I was here before.
Yeah, and so it unfortunately that takes time. And I also understand, and actually, Mrs. Lefebvre, if you wouldn't mind explaining the timing of the survey and who did your work, because of how that's going to play into this. Like, I'm not even sure if you'll get that surveyor to get that work completed.
Well, it was Kirk Stidwell that did the original survey in the 80s, so I contacted him again because he was familiar. He already had the plan of the property, and I contacted him early in the winter, and he couldn't really get to me because of the snow too. You know, you couldn't really tell where the bank was, so he waited till spring to do the survey again. So I hear he's retiring, so we might have to start from scratch to get a new sketch plan done.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through Madam Chair, yeah, I'm looking at the road image as well. I don't know, you're going to be about 11 feet from the bank of the river as it is. Personally, I don't see an issue with it, and I don't know that if you go much further, if you go 24 plus the extra 11, like, then you've got a tree that probably ends up having to come down, or you're getting pretty close to the house at that point. And I know, given an old house, you don't want to be digging too close to a foundation that's already existing. I think we're making a lot of work for nothing here. So personally, if I'm of the opinion, if we can move forward with this tonight, I'd be happy to move it, but I don't think we're quite there yet, given there's public that have arrived. But that's my thinking right now. I'm not willing to set you back.
Councillor Locke?
Thank you. Through you, I think I have two questions. One being, if you can just explain to me, Ms. Haley, what needs to be updated with the survey? If it's just a matter of showing like the riparian zone of that ditch and the placement of the proposed garage. And then I guess my subsequent question is that if we were to approve this tonight, would the RRCA have comments for us? Like, will they follow up with their comments, and then that will affect, you know, the decision later on, or how did they come into play?
So to answer the first part of your question, in terms of having the survey updated, it would be the site plan that was submitted to us that would have to be updated to show the new setbacks. So currently we're seeing a proposed 8-foot setback from the top of bank, and depending on the agreed upon new location, I would have to know if that setback is, you know, 10 feet, 11 feet, 12 feet, and this would have to be updated to show that. It also would then be required to accompany the building permit application. So you can use this site plan for both the minor variance and the building permit. And it has to be a measurement done by a person who can provide a professional, but done by a qualified person to submit the measurement, because you or I can't go out there and get an accurate measurement just with a measuring tape and know. And especially when we're dealing with water course setback, we have that 30-meter requirement. We need that setback to be done by a professional to determine what the proposed one is going to be. In terms of the second part of your question, this is not a regulated area by the Conservation Authority. So they're not following up with a permit after this. They're providing comments on this application from a land use planning perspective, not from their regulation perspective under the Conservation Authority Act. So if the committee decides to approve, defer, or approve or refuse tonight, the Raisin Region Conservation Authority is finished with this process. So we don't, I mean, I always recommend that we respect our agencies, and we certainly consider our agencies' comments. It is entirely up to the committee as to how they make the decision, because you're basing your decision on 4 tests being, does it meet the intent of the official plan? Does it meet the intent of the zoning bylaw? And is it minor in nature? And is it negatively impacting, the surrounding properties, or is it aesthetically pleasing in the area? Is it a good fit in the area? Those are the things you're looking at. And that's where we come from, where we felt if it was approving the situation, and because our drainage superintendent had reviewed it, and we did consult with the Conservation Authority previously, but it was a different employee. So we weren't expecting this type of comments today. Not only that, and Councillor Lang could speak to this better too, they've made some recent changes at the Conservation Authority and how they're reviewing other areas. So that's why we weren't expecting that, and Mrs. Lefebvre was not made aware of that in advance of the circulation, because we didn't expect these comments to come this evening. So hopefully that answered all your questions.
Councillor Lang, you want to say something?
Yes, I appreciate all the extra information, and do respect the Conservation Authority's opinion, obviously, but I think in this instance, the shed has been existing for many, many years. All of the buildings in that area are closer than the setback, just because it's the nature, it's running right through the middle of town. That's been there for several hundred years. I would move to approve this for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. I think there's members of the public who are here. I'm not sure, though, if they're here for their next public? Okay. So, so then if there's no public comments, then maybe I'll just make a quick comment. Certainly the last thing I would want to do is hold you up. I guess what's in the back of my mind is, that we have some properties that have municipal drains that go through them, and the residents are complaining of erosion and issues. And so I would certainly not want you to suffer for like similar, especially if there's new excavation that could potentially cause more erosion, or if that big tree finally does succumb.
Big tree, yes.
If it finally does succumb, and then that will impact the bank. So I would want you to have all the information at your fingertips to put it at, in the ideal spot, so that there aren't any issues moving forward. But Ms. Haley and others have shared information that this is not such a cut and dry situation where we normally get RRCA comments, and that we are more bound to what they say. So I mean, I would prefer to defer, but I think there's going to be a motion on the table to approve it as it stands. So, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just, I guess in this circumstance, I don't think we've seen this where they don't really hold jurisdiction over this body of water. It's not really theirs to comment on, except in kind, we'll say. If they determined that they had something they wanted done, could the applicant not just say, well, I don't feel that that's necessary, and move away from it? Or if we open up this, if we put subject the applicant to this, are they then bound to follow what the RRCA comes up with? Because that could be costly to do bank work. Very costly, probably the cost of the garage.
So through you, Madam Chair, sorry about that. So the Conservation Authority does have the right to comment on this, because I have to circulate them under the Ontario Planning Act, because it's adjacent to a water course. What they don't do, to be clear, is they don't issue permits for development adjacent to the municipal drain in this location. And then in regards to, let's say if the committee chose to approve it this evening, and if you're approving it this evening, you're approving the reduction of the water course setback to 2.44 meters, which is an improvement. And let's say we work with the Conservation Authority and Mrs. Lefebvre, and there's an agreement that she ends up agreeing to relocate the garage maybe 2 meters closer to your house, for example. It doesn't need to go back through the minor variance process. We would just work with her because the minimum, once it's approved, is 2.44 meters. So maybe there's still opportunity to work together because we should be respectful of the Conservation Authority's opinion. They are looking out for you. They're looking at your risks. They would prefer to see a 6-meter setback in an ideal situation. That might be, difficult to do in the size of your property, as well as given the space that's needed for parking as well, adjacent to your dwelling or in between your garage and your dwelling. But that could be an option as well. That does come down to whether Mrs. Lefebvre wants to cooperate, but if that's the case, we don't need to update any site plan officially because it would be approved based on the 2.44 setback. So, that could be an option.
Okay.
You have a follow-up? Yeah.
I guess just a follow-up comment. I'm going to side with Councillor Lang, and I'll say I'll second his motion to move to approve as presented.
Then we have a motion on the table to approve the presentation, the application as presented. Sorry, Councillor Luck, did you want to vote or you want to make another comment?
If you don't mind, I just would like to kind of place my opinion on this one. And I do not mean to, delay your project. But I think the Conservation Authority, even though they don't have jurisdiction in this area, they are a body that has a lot of knowledge, and for that reason, if for me, I would like to know exactly what I was getting myself into, and I would never want, my garage to settle because of erosion or because of the riparian zone. And if that tree, like Deputy Mayor Jaworski said, if that were ever to come down, that would definitely affect your riparian zone. For that reason, I'm going to say that I'd like to defer this application.
Councillor McDonnell?
In that case, I'll make a subsequent. I think it meets all 4 of the criteria that we're working towards here as a committee, and I don't think it's our place at this point to stop it, but if that's the will of the committee, I think we're going against our mandate. Personally, but.
So just so I'm clear, so if there's a motion to approve, and then if it's defeated, then that means the application's denied? Or what happens procedurally then?
You can put a new motion on the table to defer or refuse the application. You've just defeated the motion to approve it.
Okay. Right.
Can I say something else? Am I on here? So if I agreed that my husband already had spoke to them today and said, if there's a problem, we can move it closer to the house. So am I understanding that if you approved it at the present distance, but we ourselves say we will move it closer, that would be, you could approve it then if we have agreed? Because we don't want to get too close to the house. It is an old house with an old stone foundation, so that is iffy to be doing that. But we could move, if the Raisin Region are saying 2 meters, that's doable. But if they're saying 6 meters or right up against the house, it's not. But we are willing to work with them. We don't want it to be turned down and then start the process all over again.
So through you, Madam Chair, we don't want you to start the process all over again, and that's one of the opportunities that we could take advantage of, is to defer. So it allows us to work together to make sure we're not wasting your money and forcing you on a new application. So to answer your question specifically, if you got an approval for the watercourse setback at 2.44 and applied for your building permit and decided to be 4 meters away, as long as you're meeting the minimum that's been approved, then that we can issue the building permit. And that would mean if you're relocating that dwelling towards the house, you would also have to ensure that you're also conforming with the minimum approved 3.38 meter setback for your front yard, again, providing that's approved. So it comes down to the committee making that decision. It's not like, I can't recall the wording that you used, but it doesn't mean that we're giving you approvals to go to a certain number. It means this would be the minimum, and then you'd work with the RSCA. In speaking with the RSCA, I believe their goal was a minimum of 6 meters. You're requesting 2.44. I brought to their attention that I was concerned about it going too close to the house because we need to make sure you have adequate parking. And so I realize you can park inside your garage once your garage is constructed, but you are fairly close to the front of the road. So if you have visitors and things like that, we want to make sure, and currently you're parking, if you look at this photo, you're parking in between the dwelling and the existing shed. So we talked about that too, to make sure that there was existing space for that.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. So this is a unique situation that we haven't had in the past. So as I'm sitting here thinking, I think in this case, the applicant understands the risks, and I think it's now in the applicant's court if they are going to, and I strongly suggest that they follow up with the RCA to ensure that they understand the risks here and that they put that garage, you know, in a appropriate location. But I guess to what Councillor McDonnell said earlier, that this is the issue, that particular issue is sort of outside the purview of this committee in that, you know, the tests for minor adjustments don't include necessarily these kinds of issues. So I would say that I would be in favor also of approving this application as presented, but understanding that now the risks are now, you're aware of the risks, and it's now incumbent on you to work with the RCA to ensure that your garage is in a good location. Councillor McNeil, did you want to say something before we go back to a vote?
Not necessarily. I'll just say again, like, I think if the applicant's aware of the risk, I think as of now, and they seem very willing to cooperate with the RCA, I have no concerns that way. I just think if we do the minimum, I think they're probably better putting it not 6 meters, putting it, you know, at a 3 or a 4 meter if they're willing to do that, because as Ms. Haley said, they still need space to park. And to me, if they move much further towards the house, that space to park is going to be where that existing garage is, and even closer to the edge, which would even force more erosion based on the weight that'd be on the bank. But to me, if we're willing to approve, I'd be happy with that.
So I'll call the vote, I guess. So there's a motion on the table to approve the application as presented. All in favor? All right, so carried.
So thank you, Mrs.
I just want to say to the tree, if the tree ever comes down, I don't think Brent or I will be around to to have any protests, because it'll take everything out. It's a
Well,
massive tree.
I'm thinking about the big, you know, the big trees in the graveyard across the way that,
Yeah.
you know, they do, parts of
know.
them, they're starting to go, so,
I
you
like
know.
the tree, though.
It is a beautiful tree.
Mrs. Lefebvre will follow up with a decision in writing. It'll be subject to the 20-day appeal period, as I've explained to you previously. I would like to reach out to you, though, and set up a meeting with the Conservation Authority so we can work together to make sure we are doing the best we can to respect the erosion hazard and put your building in the safest location as possible.
Yes.
So thank you very much. So for next meeting is July 4th, 2022. Do we have applications already, Ms. Haley, on that one?
We do have 2 applications that'll be circulated, and you'll receive an agenda accordingly.
Okay, wonderful. So I think then if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. All in favor of adjournment? Carried.